Hi, Mike.
Hey,
So this is a special live stream because Metaverse is going on, which is like the virtual New York Comic Con, and you covered a couple Marvel panels that happened this morning for us. So what's going
yeah,
on?
it's been a busy morning for Marvel at the New York Comic Con, Metaverse, whatever name you want to go with. Yeah, there's been a lot. There's been a lot happening already.
What's the news? Where you
So
want to
our
start?
our first panel of the day was the Women of Marvel Comics, which featured several creators, storytellers, working on various different projects. I would say of the four panels that have happened so far, this was probably the most informative, most substantive. Um, we had, and I might butcher some names here again, but Sarah Brunstad, who's working on Captain Marvel and Black Widow, the ongoing comic book series right now. Captain Marvel, this series is getting into the aftermath of Empire. So she talked a little bit about what we can expect to see, and her Carol Danvers dealing with, learning that she has a new half sister in L'Oreal, which I always think of shampoo whenever I hear that name. But so yeah, interesting to see where that series will go. And she mentioned that Carol will have to make some emotional decisions in this. So I'm interested. I want to know what's going to happen there with Carol Danvers. She also mentioned that there's a lot of big things happening for Natasha Romanoff, but also for Yelena Belova in the ongoing Black Widow series. So I think when we talked about that first issue on Marvel Time, we talked a little bit about how it kind of felt like it would tie in a little bit to the movie, and now I feel even more so with Yelena coming up, with her name being dropped. So yeah, interested to see where both of those two comic series go. We also learned of a new Scholastic Marvel novel, Miles Morales Shockwave. Will feature Miles trying to raise money, doing the Spider-Man thing, trying to raise money to help after an earthquake rocks Puerto Rico, and then finding out that somebody in charge of some of those fundraisers is not exactly who they seem to be. So, getting into that classic Spider-Man kind of story.
Cool. And then we got some news about Spider-Woman, right? Jessica Drew.
Yeah. So we learned that, we have the 100th issue coming up for Spider-Woman. Not in this series. We talked about, how comic book continuity kind of gets a little bit crazy. But it's the 100th Spider-Woman issue. And the creator of that series, Carla Pacheco, mentioned that, and to quote her, she said she's going to do some things in this series that will have fans calling for her blood. And that's something that she found a lot of pride in. She's excited to torment us fans, I guess. So it looks like there's some dark days ahead for Jessica Drew, but also mentioned that there's a lot of her punching dinosaurs. So I don't know. I guess we're going to see two different sides of a coin here.
And then there's, I guess, is Jessica Drew going to tie into King in Black?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yes. They, I guess the King in Black is going to stretch over. I mean, we knew it was kind of a little bit of a crossover event happening. But I'm starting to feel like it's going to have more of an impact on the Spider-Verse as a whole. So that should be really interesting to see what Jessica Drew's role would be in King in Black.
That's interesting. And then, I mean, obviously all we talk about right now is Ten of Swords. So anyone talk about that?
Yeah, Leah Williams mentioned she's currently doing the X Factor series that we really like that's going on right now with this kind of the detective team of mutants. And she talked about her work on Ten of Swords, and in one of the funniest moments of any of the panels today, really, she talked about how the team came up with the concept, and they kind of just came together and thought, well, what's something that's cool? And they thought swords. And they said, well, what's something that's cooler than swords? And they said more swords. So that's how we ended up with a story about 10 swords. So I thought that was pretty funny and got me excited. We talked yesterday about where we're going into Ten of Swords, but got me even more excited for where this is going.
Cool. So, speaking of Ten of Swords,
Yeah.
how's that for a segue? There's a Ten of Swords panel too, right?
Right. And what's funny is I actually, this one was not nearly as informative. They were very secretive with this panel. They obviously, you have a big crossover event coming up, and you're not going to give a whole lot of information away. They didn't want to touch on too much that, might give anything away. One thing I thought was interesting was we've talked a lot in these, lead-ins to Ten of Swords, how we both really like what was happening with Apocalypse, and he seems like the big player in this series. He wasn't really mentioned at all, except used as an example very briefly. So they talked about a lot of different characters. Apocalypse was not one of them. So I'm not sure what exactly that means for his role in the series. Maybe they specifically avoided mentioning him because, they don't want to give anything away. But yeah, so I'm curious to know what the deal is with that. They did, the panel featured Benjamin Percy and Vita Ayala, who we just saw their two of their new issues yesterday, and we talked about them in Wolverine and Marauders, which saw Wolverine and Storm retrieve their swords for the Ten of Swords tournament, which two issues that we both really enjoyed. So it was cool to hear their perspective on that. But aside from that, really, this panel didn't give away a whole lot.
It's interesting because it's really I think there's a King in Black panel tomorrow, but I was kind of expecting this to be like the big comic panel, with all that. But I guess timing just wasn't right, huh?
Yeah. Like I said, I think they were being very cautious because also with the way that this is working, they're not live panels right now. This was pre-recorded, so I guess they also kind of had to tiptoe around what would have been released by the time that this panel is seen. So a lot of variables at play there.
So I think that's what we got from Marvel Comics continuity. But if you ask any fan of a certain age, they got into Marvel through this cartoon show.
Yeah, XMen the animated series. This panel was fun in that it was the creative team from an animated series that was, that ran in the early 90s. I would say Zoom calls were probably not the forte of this demographic. So there were some funny issues there, but they got through it. And I mean, this was, again, not a very informative panel, but just kind of loaded with, their stories and very entertaining for somebody who's a fan of this series. And just they showed a ton of artwork throughout this panel too, like just concept art and stuff, anything that didn't make it to TV. So it was really cool to see a lot of that. As you can see right there, the drawing of Wolverine as he appeared in the series, which they specifically mentioned that Wolverine in particular was one character that, because this was Rick Hoberg talking about Wolverine, and they asked him about drawing Wolverine for the series as opposed to drawing him for comics and with other characters, and they said Wolverine was essentially the same across the board, and I guess the animated series really influenced a lot of what Marvel Comics was doing at the time because of how popular it was.
Right. Kind of how we talked about how the movie's influencing Black Widow.
Right.
So yeah. Did anyone ask, or I guess, did anyone bring up if there might be a revival for Disney Plus? Because I've heard whispers.
I was hoping we were going to hear something about that. I was also a little disappointed that no questions came up regarding the theme song of this series because it's so iconic. Yeah, and now that's going to be stuck in everyone's head for the rest of the day. So enjoy that. No, so yeah, there was, like I said, not a whole lot of news or information or anything like that. Just really like storytelling and kind of like reminiscing. They talked a lot about how everything was hand drawn. Obviously, this was before everything was computer, created, and just talked a lot about how much work went into creating the look for all of these characters and then recreating the look when they, appeared in a different setting or, just so many different, so much different kinds of work went into this series, and it kind of it renewed my appreciation for it. And now I'm very tempted to turn on Disney Plus and start watching rewatching again.
Yeah, I started to rewatch. I didn't get all the way through it, but kind of it was my Friday night COVID show, and things were really bad. But that's Saturday morning cartoons were the medium of the '90s. But we all listen to a podcast now, right? And so here we go.
Yeah. So the final panel that they had, there are still more panels going on today, but our last one before we got the chance to talk here today was about the new audiobook series, an ebook/audiobook series. So I guess you can choose to read or listen. That is Black Panther: Sins of the King. And with so much happening in the world of Marvel right now, this project kind of just slipped under the radar for me. I feel like I remember briefly hearing about it, and then there's just so much happening between comics and movies and TV shows and toys and everything else. This got me really excited for this audiobook. William Jackson Harper is the narrator for the. And it looks like I'm having a little bit of a glitch there. I'll have to update it. But he's the narrator for the audiobook and voices all the characters in it as well. And one of the coolest parts of this panel, they featured a sneak peek, and it was probably about a 15 to 20 second clip of the audiobook, and it features T'Challa coming face to face with maybe T'Chaka. And William Jackson Harper's voice work for this audiobook is phenomenal. It's so good. And they kind of joked around with him, and the moderator asked, what did the writers think of that clip? And they're like, oh, well, Will is here with us right now. So yeah, I'll say it was good. And, and he even was just like, I can't stand listening to my voice. So somebody else is going to have to judge it for me. But really, it was fantastic. I would love to see him do some more work with Marvel in the future.
That's great. So I mean, I'm excited. You're right that this project kind of fell through the cracks. I shouldn't say it didn't fall through the cracks. It's not as present. So I think this is the kind of thing which Comic-Con's go. We're all reading Ten of Swords. We all know, it's nice to kind of discover something through Comic-Con. That's what I kind of miss is at Comic-Con, you end up being in panels that you really have no interest in, but you got to get there before something else or whatever. And so you end up learning about things. You might not become a fan of it, but you kind of experience it, and you can appreciate other people's fandoms. But learning about this was probably the highlight of my Metaverse day thus far. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to this now. Yeah, just William Jackson. By the way, William Jackson Harper, if you're not familiar with his work, if you ever watched The Good Place, he is Chidi on that show, and he was fantastic, really popular show, and he did a great job on that. And so I love seeing actors come from other projects that I love and get into the Marvel universe in any possible way. So seeing him take on this project is really cool.
I was a big fan of the New Adventures of Old Christie with Clark Gregg. No. So later today, you're going to be covering for us the Woke panel from Hulu show and Books of Blood from Hulu. Mike is going to be covering the Secrets of Star Wars, the High Republic, the new publishing initiative. So that should be enlightening, hopefully. So we will be back tomorrow, I believe, at 9:30 to talk Star Wars and more. So don't forget, 7 o'clock tonight, watch along Empire Strikes Back. And we got anything to say, Mike, before we sign off and you get a lunch so you can cover more panels?
No, yeah. If you want more details on those panels we just briefly talked about, you can check out the full stories up on laughingplace.com right now. And then, like Benji mentioned, there's still so much more to come from Metaverse. So, keep an eye on all of our coverage coming from this event.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.